Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth and final in the Iceni webinars for change. My name is Grania, and I have the pleasure to introduce our panelists for this evening and our charities that we were hoping to support through these conversations. The first is the Bay Tree is It's a social inclusion charity for women and girls based in the heart of Brixton. An integral part of the community since 1991, they provide holistic support through personal activities and workshops, mentoring, coaching, as well as English classes and integration support for newly arrived migrants and refugees. Show Racism, the Red Card provides educational workshops, training sessions, multimedia packages, and a whole host of other resources, all with the purpose of tackling racism in society. Finally, we have the UKU Diversity and Inclusion Fund. This came about after the forum that was hosted in June. In order to tackle issues that were brought up, the most immediate action arising from the forum is that there will be a Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, or DEI, committee set up to help inform and lead on changes and projects. Donations to this fund will provide the DEI committee with a budget for some initial projects. We encourage you to donate now and throughout the series. All links can be found by scanning the QR codes you can see on your screen or by clicking the links below in the description box. And now for our panelists. Sarah Melvin has played for numerous Irish national teams, including Beach Mixed 2015, Mixed Grass 2016. She captained the Irish women's national team to a gold medal in European Championships in 2019 and won European Player of the Year. She is featured on the Eurostar team in 2018 and 2019 and coached the under-24 women's team in 2019. Callum Spiers co-founded SMOG in 2013 and represented GB in Grass Mixed 2015, has played with Kerr Ireland for Mixed Beach in 2017. He is a paid coach at University of Central Lancashire and has coached GB Mixed Grass under 24 for 2018 and 2019, as well as assistant coach for the GB Women Grass and Beach in 2019. To Callum and Sarah, we'd love you to join the call and very welcome.
Hello.
Hi. So thank you first of all, very much for joining us and giving us your time this evening. I'm going to let you both get on with the conversation and really looking forward to hearing what you both have in terms of insight and some really useful information for women in leadership. So thank you very much and enjoy everything.
Cool. Thanks, Grania. So with this kind of session, the format is I'm going to be asking Sarah a bunch of questions because she's the experienced one and has a lot of relevant experience about being a woman in leadership, whereas I have much less experience of that and I'm supremely less qualified. So we're gonna be interrogating Sarah a lot and using that to kind of have some discussions because this topic is so big that it's quite difficult to get it down to just one question. So we're going to be providing like lots of context for it, and then towards the end of the session, we're actually going to be having a go at answering the question in kind of like a useful way that feels super informed. Yeah. So we're gonna start our interrogation with Sarah. How did you end up playing Ultimate? Go on, give us the life story.
Oh well, I actually kind of fell into Ultimate. It was a complete accident. I hadn't even heard of the sport until college, and even then I just came across it because I happened to live with people who decided to play it in first year. It took me over a year to be convinced that it is something that I might actually enjoy. And I really only went along to my first training session to hang out with my friends that I wasn't really having time to see, just because of college and I was playing basketball. So I reluctantly joined Frisbee. But the minute I I think went to my first tournament, which was maybe 2 months in, if even, came back, and within a week I had quit basketball and was joined the frisbee team. So very reluctant for a long time, and then it was a very quick turnaround once I actually experienced what it was like. So
that was like how you kind of got hooked. How long had you played basketball beforehand?
My whole life, really. It had been my whole life until I came across frisbee, really. So it was a big decision, but it turned out okay in the end, I think.
Okay. So have you always been sporty?
Yeah. It's basically the only thing I do with my free time, and has only ever been the only thing I've done since I can even remember. So I like trying new things, and I think frisbee kind of meshed all the things that I was naturally good at, just kind of fell into frisbee, which was really nice to figure out, and probably why I've stayed for so long.
Interesting. Yeah, because I never grew up being particularly sporty, and so like I was quite short, so I didn't make the school basketball team, and then like when I was in sixth form I decided to grow a lot, so I suddenly got very tall, which would have been kind of useful, but by then it was too far. And I think all the way through school I felt like sport was what sporty people do, and then when I got to uni I discovered that you can just play sport because you enjoy it, and I was like, no way, you don't have to be really good at it. And then I started playing frisbee, and like I kind of like got really serious after that. But you've like been sporty for ages. Is that something that you feel like your family has pushed you into, or?
Yeah, my whole family are extremely sporty. My parents would have played everything under the sun growing up themselves, so anything I wanted to try they let me, because they saw the benefit in it, I guess, and that's really paid off for me. I've tried lots of different sports, and I think the combination of skills that I've managed to gain throughout the years from all the different things has kind of helped me progress quickly in frisbee. I was able to bring in lots of knowledge and skills from other sports that were relevant, without having to learn everything from scratch. So yeah, my family definitely played a big role in that.
Cool. Do you have other like sporting heroes, like when you were growing up, were you like, I'm gonna be this person?
I didn't have any one person in particular. I always just kind of focused, it's going to sound really self-absorbed, but I was just kind of focused on myself and what I was doing. But now when I kind of look at it, people like Serena Williams, who is controversial and gets a lot of bad rep, I'm like, she's just so important for women's sports and women athletes. She's top of her game for so many years. It's just so impressive, and the fact that I think she gets negative press because of how good she is kind of really drives me to just be as involved as I can and speak out as much as I can about women in sport, because the difference between, say, the press that she would get as opposed to Nadal, Federer, Djokovic and men's side is just unfair. So I think now that I'm older, I see the importance of having kind of strong female athletes to look up to.
Cool, definitely. Did you have strong female like role models in your ultimate club, like in college, and were there people you looked up to within ultimate, for like Ireland ultimate as well?
Well, when I started, I think we were the first year to have an actual women's team in university, so we were all kind of at the same level and none of us really knew what we were doing. So initially I didn't really look up to anyone because I didn't know there were people to look up to. We were very kind of isolated in our own little bubble. But once I kind of got introduced to the national team scene and the club scene, people like Laura McGrath at the time was the name on the name that everyone knew. And she happened to come to UL and coach for a while, which again was amazing, because this is the person that is the best, one of the best in the country, and then all of a sudden she's coaching you. And similarly with Fionn Myrna, another maybe year or so into kind of my ultimate career, I knew that she was someone that was quite similar to me, and that was definitely one of the best players in the country, and I just wanted to be as good as she was. So it's looking up to people that you can kind of compare yourself to and want to kind of aim to get to. I just is really cool and really helpful, and really drives me to keep working.
I think that's really important. I think Sheena Titcombe, women's player in the different teams like Bruce Gwen Wright, tweeted like, "You cannot be what you cannot see," and I think like that's a really important thing to have, is that like when you can see a target and a goal and you've got something to aim for, then you can get there. Like I've got a friend who always tells the story of like the 4-minute mile being broken by Roger Bannister. Everyone said you can't run a 4-minute mile, and then after he did it, someone ran it even faster like 2 weeks later. And it's just like having people who've already like pushed ahead a little bit gives other people like a target to aim for, and I think that really helps. So having like good role models ahead of you is really cool, and it's also important to go for it and try and be better than those people. Cool. So you mainly found out about Ultimate at college. You didn't really want to have much to do with it in the first year. Why was that?
Well, I think it's because I just had never heard of it. My brain couldn't comprehend how a sport could exist that I hadn't heard of, and if it did, it wasn't something that was really a sport. And that, I think that was just the image of it that kind of was around when I started, especially in the West, and it really wasn't even a big club in university. And it wasn't until I actually went and played it and saw, how long the games are, how big the field is, all the different skills you actually need to be able to combine to be good at this sport, that I realized it's probably the most difficult sport I've actually played in terms of combination of kind of athletic requirements and skill level, and then take into account the weather. So it was a huge turnaround for me to go from thinking it wasn't a real sport to the most difficult sport I've ever played, or one that definitely took most effort to improve skills in. So
it is. It's deep. It's deep. It's got levels. Whenever I feel like, I kind of understand it now, then it's like, no, you don't understand it. There's so much more to it. So yeah. I know what you mean now. Yeah. Okay. Because we're going to talk about university or college ultimate, and what I was interested about is it sounds like you had like a very positive university experience, and you had a good group of players, and you made a fantastic women's team. It was a women's team.
Okay. And we were able to field teams for every event, which was the goal really at that stage. We weren't competitive for the most part, but we were having numbers of training. We could enter tournaments, and while I was there, I think that was the priority, was still trying to build it up. So it was an interesting 3 years trying to get that working and to try and create an environment that was beneficial for growth, and just one that encouraged female athletes to come and join and to stay, which was difficult. But I think we managed it. I hope we managed it. Yeah.
So how do you think that you managed to do that?
Well, I would be very much of the opinion that it's my only opinion is that women's sport and men's sport are just third sport, so that we shouldn't be considered any different to, say, the male part of the club. And I think because we were new and we were building and very inexperienced, I think sometimes we were maybe looked at differently. Expectations for people coming to help at our training sessions or to watch or things it was different for the women's team sessions than the men's team sessions, and I kind of felt it wasn't actually beneficial for the women's side of the club. So in my final year I was captain, and I made a couple of decisions that I thought would benefit the productivity of our actual training sessions and the enjoyment in general of people's experiences in the club. So I decided to close our sessions to the team and our coaches, and asked male members of the club not to just come along and stand on the sideline. I think lots at the time had good intentions, but I felt it was negatively affecting the team and people's comfort levels at trying new things and getting better and making mistakes when you had people standing there watching you. And it didn't go down overly well initially, but I think that's just one of the things, if you want to be in a leadership position, especially as a female, you're going to step on a couple of toes, and it's important to do it if you think that that's what's right. So I did.
So previously you were having like mixed training sessions or women's training sessions that male players were coming along to?
Yeah, so there were mixed sessions, there were beginner sessions, and then we had separate male or men's team training sessions and women's teams training sessions. And they were supposed to be separate, but we had male coaches from the club, which was amazing, and we really appreciate having the help because our numbers were so small. I would never refuse help from a male member of a club or someone that wants to get involved in women's ultimate. I think it's amazing. But it was the extras that were coming down, maybe with good intentions, but we're not actually doing anything in our sessions other than really standing and watching, which is intimidating, because it's like playing a game, and training is supposed to be where you learn and you improve. And I think just having people watching was adding an extra level of pressure that we didn't need, especially as a kind of inexperienced growing kind of community. So yeah, I tried to put a stop to that, so that we could have a productive hour and a half, 2 hours where you could make as many mistakes as you want and not worry about the people on the sideline, whether they're talking about your mistake or not. Because most of the time they probably weren't, but your thoughts are hard to control sometimes. So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think like that's a really good idea. And something that I absolutely hate is like, well, sometimes it's a bit of the blind leading the blind. Like when someone's not super experienced and then they ask someone on the sideline who probably also isn't very experienced, and they just like hand out terrible advice about what to do, and it's just like like that. I find that happens a lot, and particularly interactions between female and male players, where male players are just like, listen, woman, here's some great advice for you, because I can throw a flick. I know a thing or two. And I think like a lot of the time that kind of, it's not a great relationship between like two kind of beginning players. Like you should really just talk to someone who's very experienced about it, rather than like the closest person. I know that the guys absolutely love handing out advice. In my experience of men, we love to hand out advice to everyone. So I think like I think that's a good idea, and I think like having women only practices is a really good way to make a supportive environment. And the other thing is like with a lot of training things, you don't need people if they're like coaches or if they're spectators to like talk and say things. Like you don't need it. What you need to do is practice throwing for like half an hour. You don't need constant talking because most of the time it's just in one ear and out the other ear.
And I think the point of the sessions usually is to focus on something specific that you've already decided on. And I think if questions are directed to the group and the coaches as a whole, everyone can benefit. So if it is something you want to address, everyone benefits from it, not just this one person. And if it's something that really just isn't relevant and isn't really needed at the time, it can be addressed and then quickly moved on from, to focus on the things that we need. Because I think in the beginning, it's really hard to decide what's important to focus on as a beginner because there's so much. It's flicks, backhands, breaks, and then people start talking about hooks really quickly. And then really, you just need to be able to throw and pass to open people. And I think the more people that exist in the training session, the higher the chance that focus will be lost and we're going to miss out on a good opportunity to learn the key things that we need to learn in the beginning.
Yeah, and again, I think what you said about having spectators adds like an extra layer of pressure and like increases self-consciousness. I think that is something like building that self-confidence, I think is easier to do in my experience of male players than with female players. And so a lot of the times guys just aren't thinking about like that extra layer of pressure that they can be adding on. And yeah, and I think like it's not like an offensive request or anything to be like, do you mind just like not coming to women's practices a bit? Like I think that's fine. Yeah. And it's also fantastic that you had people who wanted to be there and support. I think that's great as well. But jumping back, you wanted to become captain. Why do you want to be captain?
Well, at the time, I don't think I really wanted to become captain, but I was one of the most experienced there. I had the year before, I had managed somehow to make the under 23 mixed team for Ireland, and after that summer, I was by far the most experienced. So it was a natural progression was to take charge of the women's side of the club. I actually did enjoy it, although it was definitely stressful at times, and there was a lot of kind of tough conversations and things to happen during that time. But looking back, I think I was probably the right person for the job because I was fine to have those difficult conversations and to maybe not be the most popular because of my opinions on things like how the club is run and the importance of women's sport and things like that. So that was again more of a kind of had to do it rather than really gunning to be the captain that early on in my ultimate career.
Okay, so like what percentage of you being pushed into it and what percentage of you going for it do you think it was? Do you think it was like 50-50? Do you think you were mainly pushed, or do you think you just did it?
I'd say I wouldn't even go with pushed, I'd go obligation. I felt more obliged to do it, maybe about 60-70% obliged to do it, the rest of it wanting to. Again, that would have increased throughout the year as I started to enjoy the leadership role, but in the beginning that wasn't something that I really had wanted to do.
Okay, and you felt obliged because you saw that you were the most experienced in the club.
Yeah, and it seemed unfair to ask someone else to do it if they didn't want to do it. So I think I was the only one that went for it then in the end. So,
well, I mean, I'm pleased that you used your powers for good. Cool. Yes. Okay. I'm trying to be mindful of time because there's just so much stuff to talk about, and I think like the uni and college experience is really important. It's very formative for people. We've kind of like talked about it a bit, like with the women's only things. But how do you make the university?
Well, I can only really speak from my experience and kind of from the Irish perspective. I don't really know what it's like in other countries. But I think I was thinking about this earlier today, and I think it's that equality versus equity kind of discussion. For example, when I was in university, we had equal playing time or equal pitch time as men and things like that, but we needed more to get to their level. So we needed good facilities, but because we weren't as good in terms of rankings, we would get kind of worse facilities, which part of me can understand because I'm super competitive, and if I'm training to be competitive, I like good facilities. But if the goal, which I think it should be in university, is to grow numbers, then providing better training times, so more suitable times and better facilities, is really important for the women's side. And again, my own experience, some universities out there might have way more numbers than women. I'm not really sure, but I think that's a huge bit. And then just that level of respect of seeing women as athletes, not as female athletes, women athletes. They're athletes just like every other person at that session. I think those three things for me are just really important, and they just show, or they like express that the club cares, and the club has thought about this, and that they want to help grow women in ultimate and women's sport. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, I think like it is really important to think about the equality versus equity thing, because a lot of clubs in the UK, I think it's improving. But when I was at university, and my team was guilty of doing this, we'll often play to just defaulting to using men for a lot of things, and prioritizing men's training time kind of thing, and not worrying too much about the women's things, and like equitable play. And I think one of the really important things is making sure that everyone at training has the equal opportunity to turn over as frequently as possible. Because I think people improve by being given the opportunity to fail, basically, and like helping to teach people that it's not the end of the world to fail, and you've got to fail a bunch of times before like you get it right. So I think like my number one tip for improving women's experience of like uni ultimate is throw them the disc all the time, and make them throw the disc as much as possible. And like it's always about investment, in that like you might lose a game by doing this revolutionary tactic called using all of your players, but in the long term you'll build confidence and you will win games as a result of like investing in everyone in your team. And for the equity thing, like if you have to invest heavily in one particular gender, then do it. Because I think it's really important to turnovers for everyone.
I think actually one thing on that is because uni is so short, like it's a couple of years and people leave all the time, I think there's this pressure to perform in there and when you're there and get results, when at the time it is really important, but longevity I think is maybe more important than just winning things in university. I think if we could change our attitude in university to growth and progression and longevity rather than how many IVs we can win this year, then I think that benefits everyone long term, the sport, individuals, just everything. So I think it will definitely take a long time, but I think a mindset change might be the biggest thing that needs to happen for any of those other things that we mentioned to actually come into effect in universities.
Amen. Yeah, thinking like long term. Yes, please. Okay, so this kind of segues into it. What's been your best experience on a mixed team, and why was it the best experience?
I have two pretty good ones, but they were both in 2015, funnily enough. But it was probably the 2015 mixed grass team that went to EUC in Copenhagen. That was an amazing experience playing mixed.
Stacked.
Yeah. And it wasn't just because we had a good year and we were doing well. I think it was because not once did I question whether we were important to the mixed team. It was quite clear that the women on our team were exceptionally talented when it came to ultimate frisbee, and that they were going to be included. We were going to be included in all aspects of the team: offense, defense, handling, cutting, whatever benefited the team was going to happen, and egos from either gender were pushed aside. So it was just, I never questioned that any female on that team was not important. So it was actually a really amazing team to be a part of.
Was that something that was like consciously trained into you, or was that a kind of like, oh, we're a national team, everyone's sick, hooray? Because a lot of the time you can have like a really good honeymoon period where like you start playing with a team and you're like, I love everyone, they're just like the best, and you just like, you can build trust really quickly because you come into it with a very high level of respect for everyone. But was it like trained into you from day one and like, listen up everyone, play good together?
Everyone did definitely come in with quite a lot of respect for each other. I don't think it was explicitly, maybe the odd time, but I don't think it was explicitly drilled into us that, you know, this is what's going to happen. But when things were working or people were playing well, you saw that, you were rewarded. So it didn't matter who it was, whether it was the best, I don't know, who would be considered the best male cutter or the best female cutter. It was whoever was doing the tactic that the team wanted to do, whoever was doing it the best and whoever was getting the best results got that spot. And it worked out in the end that actually we worked really well on the O-line. There was a group of 4 females or 4 girls, women, that just trying to get the right word, that clicked really well. So it ended up that our O-line at the time played a lot of for women. And again, it wasn't questioned because the team knew that whatever worked went. And if you were unlucky and didn't fall in that little category, then it wasn't anything personal. You just took it on board and you were like, right, this is what the team needs, we'll do it. So I think it was a lot of seeing how clear things were at training and how things changed based on performance. It was obvious that what was happening was for the benefit of the team.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a pretty dreamy team situation to have, like an embarrassment of riches across like the whole squad. And yeah, everyone having good like respect for each other. And yeah, just going off like what works. And I think like in mixed ultimate, it's important to say like what works. Like playing four guys all the time doesn't mean that you're necessarily being sexist. Playing four guys when all of your men are losing their matchups horrendously, maybe need to think about that one. But I think like it's important to kind of play the tactics that work when you're in those like tournament situations. But when you're not in those tournament situations, like work on things and like find out where the strengths of your team are, because it can be like certain combinations, and you might have like some killer 4 women lines, you might have some killer 4 men lines. Interesting. Were you captain of that team?
No.
Who did you have a male and female captain of that team?
We had multiple captains. I think we have 4 that year, but it was a mixture of male and female.
Okay. But you've been captain of Ireland women once.
1.5 that didn't
one and a game.
That one that didn't happen that we're all trying to forget about.
Okay. Why did you want to be captain of Ireland
women? Well, initially when the team was set up, it was set up without a captain. So it was just the management. So we had coach, manager, assistant coaches. But it was decided that the captain will be picked later on when the team got to know each other, and we could pick someone that we as a team felt was a good fit, rather than someone just signing up to do it and hoping it will work out. And I think that played a huge role for me. It was my first time playing on a women's national team, and I was a little nervous about it because I just had never done it before. I'd been very heavily involved in mixed. So it was nice to get that run in, get to know the team, realise that it's amazing playing on an Irish women's national team. And we were able to, so the team was very clear about what the expectations for the captain were going to be for this particular team. We had a document that sent out that listed exactly the requirements for a captain, and it was what I wanted to be in a captain. It just fit my view of what a captain would be. So that's kind of what made me put my name forward. It was very much focused on kind of that in-game or on-pitch motivator. We had the coach to deal with tactics. I would be included, but it wasn't my job. And again, managerial things and social committee, they were all separate. So the captain had this very specific role that I felt like I could fill. So I put my name forward, and yeah.
That's pretty dreamy as well, to get like the blueprint of what they're looking for, and then for it to just be you is pretty great. And I think a lot of people's first experience with captaincy is kind of like the university thing, where you just kind of like thrust into it. And at university you're also like coaching and managing as well, and it's just like whereas like at national team level it can be different, and just different, not like better or worse. There's definitely, I can see how there's more like motivation stuff built into it.
I think for me it was having watched loads of my friends go through captaining national teams and having a million roles. So their official role was captain, but they did the job of 5 different people, and I knew I couldn't do that. I just wouldn't be able to. And it was a huge reason for me staying away from captaincy in the ultimate community at any level, because I just wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be good at it. It would probably be detrimental to the team rather than beneficial if someone was leaving me to be the manager and the social committee. They're things I'm not good at. So having that kind of really professional feel and clear outline of what the captain was going to do is just what made me kind of take that leap and finally go for leadership.
Nice. And The captaincy of Ireland Women's gone quite well. It's gone okay.
Yeah. Better than I expected, so I'll take it.
As much as I would love to grill you about Ireland women, unfortunately, we've got to actually answer the question of our whole thing. Now that we've provided all of our like context and different thinkings about different reasons, how can we get more women into leadership positions in Ultimate and support them? So they say that. What do you think?
So again, I think this is very it'll be different and based on everyone's situation, but I think it's going to have to start with numbers. We need to build our community so that women are choosing to go into leadership and because they want to, not because of an obligation. Because I think when I started watching people go into leadership because they had to, and you saw how much stress and how much pressure they were under, it didn't actually encourage me to want to do it. So I think creating a community where you're having female leaders making that decision to go in and do it would be really beneficial. But again, that's a long-term thing. We're not going to fix that one overnight. But something that actually Gravity they were toying with kind of when we came back there after COVID was giving different players opportunities at training to take a coaching or a kind of leadership bit at training. So you might be particularly good at one thing and you might want to run a drill in training session. So you're getting that experience of being in charge and in that leadership role without the pressure of everything falling on you at once when you have no previous experience at it. So I think maybe kind of scaffolding our kind of way to full leadership would be helpful for anyone that's maybe wants to do it but is nervous or thinks that they're just not ready. We don't currently have a system that allows for practice. It's unless you're captain in college, you leave college and then you're captain of a club team, and that club team might be playing All Irelands, might be going to UK Nationals, might be going to EUCF. So it's a huge jump, and I think maybe that's asking too much of people, and it's making people a bit reluctant. I know personally it would have made me extremely reluctant in the beginning to do it. So
yeah, and I think it's kind of like linked to I think like men's overconfidence in doing things. Like when those opportunities come up, you're more likely to get men throwing themselves at it because like they haven't really assessed whether or not they can do it or not. They're just like, yes, I'm going to do it. Whereas there've probably been women who've carefully considered it and thought, this is a lot actually. It's actually like really difficult. I'm not sure I can do it. Whereas a lot of guys manage to achieve things by just like saying they'll do it. Like that's how I started coaching under 24 mixed, because I just like put my name forwards and like no one else really applied to do it. So it was like, congratulations, you're in. So I was like, okay, I'm in charge of an under 24 team. I haven't played senior team. I just played under 23s this one time, and it was like, away we go. Whereas like if I'd actually thought about what that would mean, I probably wouldn't have put my name for it. And I think men are more likely to do that than women, and I think that is an unfortunate thing. And I think your idea of like scaffolding towards this, both like by pushing women into doing more like ultimate related things, like getting them to I don't know if it's like call lines, run drills at practice, and also trying to support people outside of ultimate. Like if you're a university coach, I know for this season I would like to help out my students more with the admin stuff so they can do more of the frisbee things, because when you give people that captaincy role, when it is with all these extra things attached to it, you're much less likely to get someone who's like, yes, I tick absolutely all of these boxes. I feel adequate in all of these different areas. So I think like that scaffolding idea is, I think, a really cool idea.
One thing that we currently are very lucky here in Dublin is that nearly all the university teams now, the women's team, have a female coach from one of the clubs in Dublin. So it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out in the next couple of years, to see if women going through college recognise these other female players coming back and giving back and being in that leadership role, whether that will continue and we'll see more of these players coming back in to take those roles. So I think next couple of years will be really interesting to see what effect having a female coach of female players kind of from that beginner stage will have on the community.
Which is again providing that like target and role model would be like, that's what I need to aim for. Because like if you set like a really high standard, usually people can achieve what you put in front of them. If you're like, I remember I thought I was like God's gift to Ultimate, and then I went to one of the really big like club tournaments, and like I was like, I can throw a flick, I'm sick. And then I went there and everyone was throwing flicks, and I was like, okay. I'm like, just seeing what the standard actually is like really is really important. So like having great female coaches come to your club, be like, this is the benchmark. It gives you something to like aim for, so that you aren't just like content with like, I'm just gonna
yeah, because it's easy to say, oh well, he's bigger, taller, faster, so therefore I'm not going to be able to do that. So if I can't, it's fine. That's taken away when you've someone that's very similar to you standing in front of you, telling you that you can do it and showing you how to do it and that it's possible. So yeah, just that whole visibility, seeing what you can do is yeah.
Any other like closing thoughts on this?
I just, one last thing that I thought when you were speaking there was that the confidence that the men's community seem to have in their ability, if they could encourage the female community to do some of the things rather than just doing it themselves, it might help. Again, just another little thing, because we might talk ourselves out of it, but if it's coming from someone else telling you that you can do it, it's just nice.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. Like if we saw like a pie chart of confidence in the Ultimate community, I think it would be skewed towards the male end. I think we have to kind of share some of that and be like proactive in seeking out female players who we think are terrific, and just like tell them they're terrific, tell them that they're capable of doing these things, and once you set that expectation, that they're probably going to rise to it and be awesome. So I think like as well as other women may also support other women, that's fine. And yeah, I think cool. There's lots of things that we can just like, I could talk about like this kind of subject all night, but unfortunately we don't have all night.
Yeah, I think some people probably want to either get some dinner or finish up this evening. But Sarah and Callum, thank you so much for your time. That was really, really interesting to hear all your thoughts. And personally, Sarah, I got quite nostalgic listening about you talk about 2015, 2016. So really fun memories of all those teams with you, and can categorize that Sarah is an amazing captain in terms of just being able to tell you that you can do this and be like, oh, well, if Sarah says I can do it, then I can do it. So I think really feeding into what you discussed about, if you just let people know that they're capable of something and it's coming from a peer and someone that they think is really good at what they do, I think goes leaps and bounds rather than it coming from a coach or something else in the community. So I think definitely in Irish Ultimate, we're quite lucky that we're close knit that you've got lots of people that you're like, yeah, they're awesome, and they're like in your WhatsApp group and you can just ask them and it's great. So we've got a couple of questions. First one's for Sarah. So do you think you would have been happier in the college captaincy position if you'd been trained for it more? So if there had been a mentee position for you to try out first?
Yeah, definitely. That it would have just given me an idea of what to expect. I went in with an absolute notion what was going to happen, what was going to be expected of me. But yeah, even if I'd had at the end of the previous season a chance to hand over documents, a discussion, run a couple of drills at a session, I probably would have been a lot happier going into my final year then.
Great, and it sounds like Gravity are doing something similar at the moment. So everyone watching, encouraging ways of bringing up the women in your club to those standards. The second question, I'll give it to yourself, Callum, first, and then I'll ask Sarah for your input. What sort of role does the whole club leadership play of all genders in supporting women joining the ranks?
Well, kind of leadership's going to shape people's experience of Ultimate. So one of the small things we did in Smog, which really helped our balance of play, was just by implementing a rule and a mantra, something we repeat all the time. Is just throw it to people when they're open. If someone's open, throw them the disc. And that shaped Smog as a mixed team. And that one tiny change made us play so much better as a team. And so I think the leadership really does shape what people do. And I think it's important for them to be proactive in just taking steps and thinking about how they can make Ultimate as fun for everyone as possible.
Yeah, thanks. Sarah, same question?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with everything Callum said. I think having good communication across all the leadership in a club and having it be seen that each part of the club, the mix, the men's, the women's, that all the leadership get on, they discuss, there's no power imbalance there, that if it's clear from the top that all levels are the same, then I think that will filter down into the rest of the club. So just having that good, clear, open communication and respectful communication from no matter the standard of each division, I think that can filter down and really help club environment.
Great. And I have my own question. I think there is definitely a nervousness when it comes to being a women's captain or involving being a women's coach, shall we say. I guess I'm interested to hear what kind of myths or stereotype did you not experience when you were captaining or coaching a women's team?
Well, that's really interesting. Well, one of the big things is just that, women are exceptionally emotional and, we're hard to manage, or that, giving feedback or criticism is going to be difficult and you don't want to hurt people's feelings. It happens as much as it would happen across in any gender. So people's natural ability to take criticism or to how they feel, it's no different in women's. We are all capable of receiving feedback and implementing it and having rational discussions with people. I think even when I was going in initially, I wasn't even sure, whether people would be upset and come to me and things like this. And it doesn't happen. People get upset and they talk, but it's nothing out of the ordinary. So anyone out there thinking of coaching a women's team, it's just like coaching a men's team, except we're women. It's not very different.
I'd actually say it's easier to coach a women's team than a men's team. Actually, because men just have all of these opinions and dissenting things. They constantly want to like just interfere, and there can be like a lot of drama on men's teams as well. So I think like coaching women's has been like so much fun, and I have like almost no experience of it, but the experience I have so far has been terrific, and like it's been super fun.
Amazing. Well, thank you both again so much for your time. And everyone who's watching, if you've enjoyed it or enjoyed any of our series, please do consider donating to one of the charities that we mentioned: Bay Tree Centre, Show Race in the Red Card, and UKU Diversity Fund. And also just a quick shout out to Sarah McCann, who answered that question about the leadership roles. But that's it from everyone here. Again, Sarah and Callum, thank you so much for your time. And to everyone watching, have a lovely evening.